My name is Elle. I am a female to male to female detransitioner.
I recently detransitioned, probably like a month and a half ago, and I've been actively living detransitioned into a woman for like 2 days now.
My name is Jack, and I am a female to female detransitioner.
When you go into Planned Parenthood, at least for me, I went in and I signed like a little consent form. They didn't really ask me any questions, and they took a blood draw, and then I scheduled to come back for 2 weeks later after the lab results had come in and get my prescription. That was it. So my opinion first on all of that. I mean, it must be nice to just be able to walk in and finally, just say, hey, I want to start hormones now, and then just kind of kick that off. Although I will say that, I mean, with the whole just giving hormones to whoever walks in the door, I mean, I don't think is necessarily a good thing.
Imagine how many girls have felt uncomfortable in their female bodies before growing into them and becoming strong, confident women who are happy with themselves. This is how it used to be before dysphoria was medicalized, before women were told they could become men. Medical professionals attributed my dysphoria to an innate identity. The internet encouraged this. My parents didn't know how to respond, assuming that therapists and doctors would know better than to let a 16-year-old make the wrong, life-altering decisions.
I regret my double mastectomy more than I regret going on testosterone. Like, if I had gone on testosterone and never had a double mastectomy, I feel like I could almost reverse all of the effects because, my voice will always be deeper and I'll always have the body hair, but at least I would have still had my whole body. But parts of my body were cut off. And when I look at myself in the mirror, I feel mutilated, and I don't mean that to be dramatic. That's just genuinely how I feel. Like, when I see myself naked, it's like when I look at myself from the rib cage down, like the belly button down, I feel like I look like a woman, at least mostly. But when I look at the rest of my body, without my wig on and without my makeup, and when I see my chest, I do feel like I look mutilated, or like I feel like some kind of bad science experiment. People ask me like, do you regret it? I mean, yes, I regret it. I think it's the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life.
I got very active in the trans communities on Reddit, on Twitter, and spent most of my time online. Didn't do anything in real life at all. Really, I didn't have any friends. I didn't go to school at that point. So the only people I really talked to on a daily basis were the people that I talked to online, and that definitely didn't help. I was basically consumed by trans media online, trans content online. So about a year later, I started testosterone, and I was 16. I had been going to a therapist who tried to tell me that she didn't want me to transition. Then I went to a therapist from the LGBT center who told me that she was ready to get me on hormones from day one.
I was able to have a double mastectomy because I had one appointment with a therapist who diagnosed me with gender dysphoria. I saw him one time. I believe I was 16 years old. I could have been 15, but I'm pretty sure I was 16. I don't know. We must have talked for only like 45 minutes or something like that. And he diagnosed me with severe depression. I still have like the diagnosis paper: severe depression, severe anxiety, and gender dysphoria. And that was a piece of paper that allowed me to go on testosterone. And that was the piece of paper that allowed me to have a double mastectomy at 19 years old, 18 years old.
I mean, like, when you go to the doctor and you want to get like a medication for something, they don't just give it to you. You know, like they want to make sure that you're taking the right thing to help your specific needs. So with Planned Parenthood just kind of willy-nilly, you know, just almost handing out hormones like candy to anybody who walks in the door, you know, regardless if you're actually transgender or not, or just confused or whatnot. I mean, I feel it's almost disrespectful to people who are actually transgender. I mean, like, 'cause like they're trained medical professionals. I mean, shouldn't they be asking you more questions and like taking more care to give you what you actually need? I mean, that can't be good for the transgender community in general, anyways. I mean, because I mean, when you're just handing out hormones to anybody who wants them, I mean, you're bound to be giving it to somebody who shouldn't be taking hormones, like myself or somebody else who detransitioned. I mean, the more people you just hand it out to, I mean, that's just going to mean more detransitioners down the line.
Somebody quoted my tweet and said, to any women out there, how did you feel about your body when you were 14? Were you comfortable in it? Why are we encouraging teen girls to believe their bodies are wrong? Somebody says, very uncomfortable in my own skin, hated my periods, wanted to be a boy because they didn't have to go through that every month. Very happy to be a woman now. Hating your period is such a universal female experience that is not talked about. Women have been feeling like this since the beginning of time, I feel like. I feel like teenage girls, especially like in this generation, are being told that they can opt out of this, of all of this. Of womanhood, of expectations of society, looking a certain way. You can just opt out by changing the way that you identify. There are so many young teen girls right now who are identifying as men because of this. So many young women who don't want attention from men, who don't want to deal with growing into an adult woman because of everything that you're told that means. You can just say, no, I'm not a woman, I'm a guy.
I had this surgery. Well, actually, let me back up. I had the consultation, and my mom drove me to have the consultation, and I probably saw the surgeon for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Basically, what happened was he walked in, my shirt was off, it was extremely uncomfortable. He touched my breast, he looked at my breast, we took photos, like one facing to the side, one facing to the front. And then he was like, okay, we're good. And I didn't see him again. I just saw the nurses and anesthesiologists, and they rolled me back and put me under. And when I woke up, my breast was gone. And I remember waking up and being in extreme pain. The feelings of dysphoria were never there until I started having sex with a woman. And I think that should have been a big red flag for me, but I just didn't know. I wasn't aware of what the criteria that should be met for someone to be considered transgender. And so when I came out to my mom, she was like, well, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, even though I don't think I was sure. I remember laying in bed and being like, well, am I sure? I wasn't. But I was so stubborn, such a stubborn person, that once I had decided on something, like once I decided like I am trans, I was like, well, there's no going back and this is what we're doing now. But the thing was like I couldn't reach for a plate in the cabinet to feed myself without the pain, or like it was really hard for me to take a shower by myself. Like I really needed someone to help me. And for a little while, like they were willing to help me, but then after some time, you know, maybe like the first week, it kind of seemed like they were really irritated. So I had a really, really difficult time, and I was out of work for 6 weeks, and I could only sleep on my back. And I remember not feeling anything. I did not feel happy about having a double mastectomy. Like, I don't want to say I felt sad about it, but it was more like I didn't feel anything. Eventually I went back to work, but I was still experiencing like a lot of pain, and I basically went immediately back to doing all this physical work because my job was basically like to throw stuff around, and it would hurt me so much. Like I would pick up these 50-pound boxes and like throw these bags of potatoes and stuff, and I would just be in so much pain. Like there was a few times where there was like a center island in the middle of the grocery store where I'd be with some of my coworkers, we'd be like trimming vegetables or something, and I would just be like keeled over on the floor in pain. Like, I'm not a crier, but I was like on the verge of tears because I was like hurting so much. And my coworker was like, "Are you okay? Like, what can I do?" Like, they like didn't know what to do. And I was like, "I'm really sorry. Like, I just had reconstructive surgery. Like, I just need a minute." And I would just be literally huddled in a ball on a concrete floor at my job.
And I mean, I think that as a doctor or some like people who are like trained medical professionals, I mean, should be asking more questions instead of just having you walk in, be like, "Hey, I'm transgender, I want to take these," and then them just like, "Here, take your prescription and get out." I mean, it's like, we got our money.
And it makes me angry for myself, and it also makes me angry for other people, because the people who have reached out to me, especially privately, and told me about their regrets regarding surgery, whether that be a mastectomy or any type of top surgery or hysterectomy or basically like any sex reassignment surgery or cross-sex hormones, like, it made me a lot more upset than I thought it would, and not in like a sadness type of way, but like a very angering type of way. Like, it made me really mad that this has happened to other people, and doctors were just like, "Yeah, I'll take your money and I'll take out your organs."
But I mean, of course, hindsight, because I mean, back when I wanted to take hormones, I mean, I thought Planned Parenthood, oh my God, this is like a godsend. I mean, I don't have to go, because I didn't want to talk to a therapist. I mean, so I don't have to jump through any hoops. I don't have to do anything. I just walked in and got it. And yes, that's on me for not knowing what I wanted to do. But I also feel like if it wasn't just as easy as just walking in and signing a form for something that permanently changes your body for essentially the rest of your life in some aspects, I think, like, if it wouldn't have been so easy for me to just walk in, I don't think I probably would have transitioned, because I think the longer I would have thought about it and given it more time to think and given it more consideration, I think it may have played a part and may have influenced me transitioning at all. If it just wasn't so easy just to willy-nilly on impulse just go and decide to take hormones.
There is a currently popular catchphrase in politics, and I'm concerned that it's going to become a thought-terminating cliche, especially, but not only, on the left-wing end of the political spectrum. The catchphrase I hear again and again is, in reference to police reform, police misconduct, police violence, that we should only listen to the voices of African Americans. In reference to transgender people, that we should only listen to and believe the voices of trans men and trans women themselves. This is fundamentally incompatible, not just with the concept of deliberative democracy, it's also fundamentally incompatible with the concept of research itself. In Cambodia, many decades ago, there were violent, calamitous, disastrous events that today some people call the Cambodian genocide. Some people might call it the Cambodian Holocaust, or the Cambodian Civil War, or the Cambodian famine. You could say, a little bit more neutrally, the Cambodian Revolution. Do you think we should only trust and we should only listen to the voices of Cambodians about what happened and why? And that's an easy question, because we're talking about something that happened decades ago when I was a small child, basically, before many of you were born. What about the current political situation in Cambodia? Do you think we should only ask Cambodians? Do you think there's some unique value in the perspective of a detached outsider in evaluating what went wrong in Cambodia before, decades ago, and what's going wrong now? I would be the first person to admit there are some aspects of Cambodian culture and Cambodian politics and even Cambodian economics that only an insider can understand, that would be incomprehensible or even invisible to an outsider, to a detached observer, an analyst from a foreign culture like myself. But there are other aspects that are invisible to people within that culture and immediately seem very important to an outsider. Give a really quick example. In the years leading up to the Cambodian Revolution, the level of violence that was normal in that culture was shocking and abhorrent, not just to Europeans who visited Cambodia, but like to Chinese people and Japanese people. Also, like people came from other parts of Asia to Cambodia. They still had the equivalent of gladiatorial games of men fighting to the death for the entertainment of the crowd. Not exactly the same as in ancient Rome, but nevertheless with their own weapons, with their own tradition. Their levels of violence and executing and killing people for incredibly minor infractions, what was considered normal. Acts of cannibalism on the battlefield, cutting open your enemy and eating an organ from their body. Yes, on the one hand, Cambodia was a Buddhist culture committed to Theravada Buddhism, a religion of total nonviolence, a religion in which it's contrary to the religion even to kill a fly or to kill a mosquito. On the other hand, this was a shockingly, unbelievably violent culture, and someone who lived in that culture during those generations, they would regard those things as normal. Oh yeah, they go and watch the gladiatorial games, right? These things, when you grow up within a culture, that won't really stand out to you in quite that way. And in this same way, an outsider can look at how the ideas of Marxism and communism went from Germany to Russia, from Russia to China, from China to Cambodia. There's an analytical perspective of an outsider that really matters. And you know what the truth is? It doesn't invalidate the perspective of cultural insiders. It doesn't invalidate the perspective of Cambodians themselves. It enriches it, right? Both are necessary. But we've just talked about the easy part. We've just talked about research. The other side of this question is deliberative democracy. If you want to bring about police reform to the way the police operate in the United States, Canada, Australia, France, England, that is not a decision for black people to make alone. That is not a decision only for the victims of police brutality to make alone, which are obviously a tiny minority of the black community, and also there's a tiny minority of the white, Chinese, First Nations, American Indian. If you just gather together every person who had proven in court that they were the victim of police brutality or police harassment, I don't know how many thousands or tens of thousands you get, but then you'd have a very small minority. And guess what? They shouldn't make the decision. They shouldn't write the legislation either. If you actually believe in research, I know it sounds ridiculous to say, but this is a real question. Do you think that research can reveal facts? Yes or no? Do you think that a researcher could discover something that a native-born Cambodian themselves might not know, might not appreciate? Do you think a researcher can discover something that a transgender person might not know or might not see the significance of? If you think research just doesn't exist, if you think it's like the tooth fairy, that would be a very different view. On some level, to some extent, everyone in this audience believes in research. You just might not have thought through the implications, because a researcher is not qualified to do that research by being Cambodian. A researcher is not qualified to do that research because they're black. They're not qualified to do the research because they themselves are a victim of police brutality or police misconduct, right? You're qualified to be a researcher precisely by having the detached outsider's perspective, having the integrity, the commitment to the truth, and so on, that being a researcher entails. And again, I can sympathize, but obviously, if you are yourself personally the victim of police brutality, the police kicked in the door of your house and killed one of your children or killed your husband or wife, nobody expects you to have the detached perspective of a researcher, right? And nobody expects you to write the legislation, to come up with a new plan for what is the best decision, not just for the police and not just for the victims and not just for black people, but for all of us as a society, right? So there's a certain set of beliefs that include beliefs about research in terms of what deliberative democracy means, not just in its process, but in its outcomes. That we, all of us, in theory, if you really believe in democracy, it would be all of us. If you believe in aristocracy, it would just be some of us who get to have an opinion, but all of us get to put our salt, our seasoning in the pot, and stir it up and try to come up with the best policy for all of us to live together in one and the same society under one and the same set of laws. If you really think it's inappropriate for a detached outsider to have a perspective on and to be advocating new laws and new policies on the hormone replacing therapy, the drugs given to transgender people, riddle me this. Do you think that only professional athletes should be allowed to vote on whether or not they get to use exogenous testosterone, steroids, or other performance-enhancing drugs? Do you think there's a decision to be made there that's not just what would be convenient for the athletes themselves? Athletes who want to win in their sport, they may want to look beautiful. Not all of them may be athletes. Some people may be using steroids because they want to be in pornography, they want to be models, they want to be actors, they want to be in the movies, right? Those people, they may make one decision, what's good for them, right? But you and I, right now, if you believe in deliberative democracy, if you believe in research, there's the possibility that we might know something, we might learn something through investigation where we have to make a decision as for what's best for all of us as a society moving forward.
I mean, really, people like to disrespect my crew, but the fact is that you know my name and I don't know you.